You are now listening to Your Ideal Day with Adam Parker. Each week, we'll bring you an inspiring person or uplifting message on how to unlock your full potential. For more information, please visit youridealday.com. Your ideal, it's what you make it.
Could the missing piece to your gut health be more than just taking another probiotic supplement? Could it actually be something ancient, alive, and bubbling on your kitchen counter? In a world filled with sterile foods, pasteurized products, and shelf-stable everything, our connection to living, microbial-rich foods has nearly vanished. And with it, our gut health, our immune function, and digestion that takes a massive hit. But what if you could bring that ancient wisdom back? What if the key to reclaiming your vitality was hidden in the lost art of fermentation? That's exactly what today's guest is here to share. I'm joined by my good friend Austin Durant, the founder of the Fermenters Club and author of the brand new book, Fearless Fermenting. Austin has been teaching people to reconnect with real food through wild fermentation for over a decade. And his work is an amazing intersection of microbiology, culinary craft, and ancestral nutrition. In today's episode, we explore why fermentation is more than just food prep. It's biological alchemy. How fermented foods unlock nutrients that raw and cooked foods can't. Also, what most people get wrong when they start fermenting at home. And why overcoming the fear of fermentation is the first step to mastering this ancient skill. And trust me, by the end of this episode, you are going to be inspired to get fermenting yourself. I've been fermenting food now for probably 5 years. I am the master fermenter in my household, and it's something that we incorporate into our diets every single day. So before we dive in, if you've ever felt confused or intimidated by fermentation, this is an episode to bookmark and come back to. And if you love what you hear, grab a copy of Austin's book, Fearless Fermenting. It's packed with wisdom, humor, and practical guidance around all things fermentation. A link for the book is in the show notes. Now let's dive into this conversation with my good friend, Austin Durant. So we're here today to talk about your book, Fearless Fermenting. And I absolutely love the concept of fermentation. I do it a lot myself. And it's great to have you on to talk about the book and your journey of fermentation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a long journeys within journeys, right? Including the one that led you and I to meet, right? Back in last October at the Wise Traditions Conference in Florida. I got to start off with sharing our connection, right? Where I think we're both standing in line for the amazing food that's served at every meal at this conference, which is about nutrient-dense diets and ancestral ways of eating and that sort of thing. So, and I see this dapper gentleman standing there, and I knew he was a speaker, but I hadn't introduced myself yet. And yeah, it was just like we hit it right off, like, oh, fermentation, and we both get it. So yeah, so that was that, and we got to know each other, and now here we are.
And that's the power of community. And that was such a great event. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, you get to meet like-minded people. I remember we hit it off straight away. Like it was like we're in the queue, and then we ended up having lunch together, and then it just kind of took off from there. So it was a lovely time, and I really, really enjoyed that conference. It was great to go to Florida, fly across the ocean to serve. So it was a great event.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm on the west coast of the U.S. now. But I actually was born and raised right very close to where we were meeting. So that was kind of cool, homecoming of sorts.
So what inspired you to write the book? I absolutely love it. When we met, I was talking about how it just looks beautiful, man, like the photography and concept. So talk to me about what inspired you to put pen to paper.
Yeah. So the journey actually begins probably about 15 years ago when I was just, wanting to understand where does our food come from? What is, what's buzzwords, what's real, whatever, natural, and all these sorts of things. So sort of separating the wheat from the chaff. And along that journey, that's when I started discovering things like how our ancestors used to eat. And that's when I discovered the Weston A. Price Foundation. And then one of the pillars of their organization is to eat fermented foods, because there are so many reasons why: the flavor, the tradition, and of course the health reasons. So that was just put into my brain at that time. It was like 2010. And then I came across a TV show that the guy was making a batch of sauerkraut. And I was like, okay, let me give this a try. And at that point, it literally shifted my consciousness. This was crunchy. It was salty. It was sour. It was delicious. And I had never really been exposed to the real stuff, So that was like, wow, this is powerful tonic food. And it's something that was just empowering from that very moment. And so that was the genesis of what became my business, which is Fermenters Club, which was just, again, an attempt to share this knowledge and also create communities, because those are both crucial things to our physical and mental health, right? So that was Fermenters Club. I did it as a hobby. And then switched over to the universe gave me a little shove to do it as a full-time gig. So that's really about hands-on workshops, creating communities through things like producing festivals. And then eventually that's sort of like, well, what's the next thing? And then that led into the book. So how do I scale the message of how to impart the knowledge of how to make fermented food safely and having fun with it? So a book was sort of the next iteration. And that's when Fearless Fermenting began about 5 years ago. And it's just a distillation of that long 15-year journey I've been on. Mostly recipes, but it's also at the front end of the book I kind of say it's a textbook meets cookbook. It kind of teaches you about the importance of fermented foods, how they interact with our body, how they support gut health. And then we sort of get into the different chapters or different classifications of different types of foods, such as pickles or maybe kimchi or sourdough. These are sort of different fermented foods, all which support our health. So that's the short of that. And then it's more or less a self-published title. I had a local photographer shoot the food. I had an editor who was a specialist in cookbooks and just kind of built the book, like I would build any other business. And that was pretty rewarding. And it came out so much more beautiful than even I envisioned. So very happy to share it.
Do you know what I love? Sally Fallon, that book, Nourishing Traditions, literally has created multiple industries. Literally. I honestly think like the bone broth industry came out of that book. The fermentation industry came out of that book. Industries around educating, like so much has stemmed from that book where she brought all of that knowledge together. It's such a powerful, powerful book. It was lovely to meet her in person as well. I've had her on the show many times, but beautiful book. And it's great that was, getting introduced to the Weston A. Price Foundation, and that book kind of stems your journey into fermented food. So let's talk about fermented food, because I think if you're not health conscious, you'll know about probiotics. Yeah, I can take a probiotic. Yeah, and I might do, take it, see how we get on. My opinion is most of them are garbage, but we do need probiotics. They are very important for our gut. We know about the microbiome. Like, I love now certain terms that maybe 5-10 years ago, no one, unless they're in really close-knit health circles, were known about. But now terms like the microbiome, probiotics, gut-brain connection, all those things are kind of common in public speak. So let's take a step back, because a lot of people may have heard of fermented foods, but not too sure what is it. So let's start from that foundation. What are fermented foods, and why would someone consider adding them into their diet?
So fermented foods are those which have had an interaction with some sort of microbe, right? So, and those microbes are generally bacteria in the yeast family, fungi, sometimes molds, depending on what we're fermenting. And the idea is that they're transforming the substrate or the food. And I like to say it's alchemy. So they're taking something like a cabbage, shredded cabbage, and the carbohydrates in the cabbage. And during just living the life cycle of these bacterial species, they're breaking down the food, but they're not only making the nutrients more available, but they're creating additional nutrients that are hard to come by in other sources of food, such as, B vitamins, such as digestive enzymes. And of course, the probiotics, the living bacteria themselves. So these are all the byproducts of when you ferment something, what is in the food that we eat. And as you pointed out, the gut microbiome is very, very crucial to our health. I consider it to be as important as any of our own indigenous organs, right? It's an ecosystem of microbes that we build from the time that we're born. We pass through the birth canal, and in the first 1,000 days of our lives, we build up this ecosystem, which then supports us for the rest of our life. So that ecosystem consists of, among other things, bacteria, which also inside our gut are helping to break down the food. They're making minerals and things more bioavailable to us. And so fermented foods support that. They basically support that community. think of them as importing additional new microbes and a diversity of the ecosystem into our gut. So that's what fermented foods do when we eat them. They add probiotics to our system, and then we get all of the benefits of those additional nutrients that were created during the fermentation process.
I think it's powerful, man, fermented foods. I've been fermenting my own food. I'm the fermenter in my household, and I've been fermenting food probably 6 years. Just did my first sauerkraut ferment in Portugal. They're currently in the cupboard fermenting away. It's very powerful stuff, and it's great for health. And I think it's interesting that, this is nothing new. Fermentation isn't like this new trend, right? We as humans have been having fermented foods in our diets for generations, really out of necessity, right? Because sometimes it was a way of preserving food, and it's part of many different cultures. So I would love for you to touch upon that. Like, why was fermented food used previously? And, are there certain fermented foods from certain regions, for example, people consumed? And how was it adopted in the olden days before, I can buy a supplement?
Right. I mean, back in the day, I don't think people thought, how can I get more probiotics in my diet? I mean, we were solving more basic concerns like, we've got a whole field worth of cabbage and it's November and there's no possible way we can consume all this food fresh. And so how do we do that? So fermentation became a way and still is a way to preserve food. So that was one of the key things that it does. By adding the right amount of salt, we slow down the decomposition, we control it, we manage it, and that's what we call fermentation. And so there was a very practical reason. So whatever was available in that region, whether it was Eastern Europe and all the cold vegetables like brassicas, like broccoli, cabbage, etc., whether it was the steppes of Mongolia, where they have mare's milk as one of their main sources of food, and they want to extend that, so they turn it into like a kefir or yogurt style. So it was a practical way to preserve food, and it just so happened that nature is supportive of us in every way. So as we are preserving this food, it's also adding more nutrients to it. So it was just, I kind of think of it as a happenstance that we're getting the additional benefits. It was a way to preserve food. And to your point, today, we have the ability to touch into and interact with many, many different cultures. So we can kind of pick, I want to drink kefir, which is a milk-based ferment, or I want to stick to a bean ferments that were very popular in Asia, or the vegetable ferments, which were available all over the world. So we can enjoy it today as a global community, whereas back in the day, people were just using what they had on hand and utilizing nature through fermentation to help support the extension of the life and the addition of the nutrients.
I think for me, it's very. I have fermented food every day. My go-to is sauerkraut or lacto-fermented carrots. They're my go-tos. I've got into kefir over the years, but I just moving to Portugal, I haven't yet established. I haven't got kefir grains, or we haven't found raw milk, any of that sort of stuff. I would say it's very subtle. So I think we're conditioning cultures like the one thing that's going to transform everything. When you add in fermented food every day, just a condiment size with one meal, maybe two, it's so subtle what it's doing in the background in terms of improving digestion. It's a great way of breaking down food whilst you're eating, adding in additional vitamins and minerals, helping you detox. But it does so much that actually, how does that manifest? That manifests in you not getting sick. That manifests in you having more energy. It's hard to then be like, is it the fermented food I'm eating every day? But it just keeps things ticking over. And, with my family, my son is 2 in July. He has sauerkraut every day, loves it. He actually loves it. And he's a very healthy boy. So again, I just think it's underrated. It just works beautifully, but in the background when you add it in every single day into your lifestyle.
I'm glad you brought that up, because especially in this kind of like community with biohacking and that sort of stuff, like the next thing is supposed to change everything. And you're right, that fermented foods, because they're nature, she can be stark and sharp, but more usually she's subtle. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because you may not find a dramatic change, but you might if you have a specific chronic gut related issue, you might find something that's more of a gross change than somebody who may not be having symptoms of something. So it is subtle, and it is something that, to your point, that just sort of supports good health, like sort of the apple a day adage I like to adopt. It's like, a bowl of sauerkraut a day keeps the doctor.
I'm curious, Austin, what's your go-to ferment? Like, what do you have each day?
I think it depends on the season. So here I live in sort of a Mediterranean climate, so we've got a long growing season. So we already almost have pickles. So I put up my first jar of cucumber pickles. So that's my summertime favorite. I would say in other seasons when it's cooler, definitely like the vegetable ferments like sauerkraut and kimchi as well, which is sort of the Korean version. But it's just, so simple sauerkraut with kind of every meal, really. A little bit at breakfast time, a little bit at dinner.
I tell you what I also love. I love a second fermented kefir, double ferment. So I was taught you'd ferment the kefir, remove the grains, then you'd add in you could blend a banana in there, maybe a bit of cacao. And it kind of, again, the fermentation process continues, but then you just get this beautiful essence of the banana or whatever. But then I don't know the exact numbers, I'll say 10x, but you 10x the nutritional value of the kefir. It's lovely. It's a lot of work. Like what I like about the sauerkrauts, and you do the process, and then you just got to check on it, make sure all the water's topped up and everything's tickety-boo. Kefir's quite hands-on. It's like, depending on the season, it's a daily thing, and depending on your lifestyle and how much time you've got, it's a bit more work. But when you do a second ferment, it's absolutely delicious.
Now you're talking about a second ferment of dairy kefir?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I've actually not played around with that. It's nice. So you got some intense tang there.
Yeah. So I was taught there's a guy who I've had on the show many times, Victor Cosetto. He's aligned with the Weston A. Price Foundation. I think he's got some involvement. I can't remember, but he taught me second ferment. So literally you ferment the milk, kefir, remove the kefir grain culture, and then you just got the kefir as it is, and that'll be fine on its own. But then you blend a fruit, or you can put like an apple, like an orange peel just in, then you take it out.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I've heard of that technique with kombucha, so that's what I'm doing now. I've got your primary brew of kombucha where you make the tea, and then in this case, I put strawberries and mint in the bottle, seal up the bottle, and so it'll build up carbonation and add infused flavors. So yeah, that's the secondary ferment. That's brilliant. I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, definitely try it. It's good. Obviously, you have your Fermenters Club, and you come across many people who are maybe new to fermenting food or a bit more seasoned. Are there any misconceptions that you find people maybe have certain assumptions on things, or anything? No, actually, it's this. Anything you come across when people are either kind of just getting into fermented food or that whole world of fermenting? Any kind of misconceptions that you see?
Absolutely. In fact, the main one that inspired the title of the book, Fearless, is that, hey, isn't fermented foods like canning, pickling dangerous? If I do it wrong, I can poison myself and my family through botulism is a number. That's probably the most common misconception about fermented foods. And the truth is, fermentation can be a form of preservation, pickling, and canning, but there's sort of a more modern one, which doesn't entail probiotics. It's just sealing the jar up. And in that instance, botulism is more of a risk, because if you're not creating or adding acids to the mixture, then that's a potential vector for botulism to manifest. In fermented foods, it's completely unheard of, because you're adding salt to most ferments as a preservative, and also the acids that the microbes create during the fermentation process. So botulism is literally unheard of in that world. That's the misconception, is like, is it unsafe to do? So you've got that small risk, and then sometimes people will ferment something, and then you get that top layer, because that top layer is generally exposed to the environment, where it gets funky. Whether it's yeast or maybe sometimes a little bit of mold, and people freak out because it seems in the last few generations, it seems weird to put something on the shelf at room temperature on purpose and then let it grow something. Like, that seems just like radically different from, the reality, which is that's actually the norm. Point being, when you get a little bit of scum on the top, especially the part that's exposed to the air, it's actually okay. You just want to sort of remove that top layer. And if you've submerged your vegetables during the fermentation, I like to say it's fine under the brine. So the anaerobic process where the salt and the water and the bacteria are interacting is fine, as long as, it's not dried out or you don't see other funk on it. But typically speaking, you'll just see that top layer. So I like to say wipe, scrape, scoop off that top layer and all is well. So that's a kind of another misconception. And another one is that it's very difficult to do. And the reality is it's pretty straightforward. So I've sort of organized the recipes in the book really for I like to say choose your own adventure. If you remember those books, you could flip to a different page if you wanted a different outcome. So in this case, it's about, you're going to get the 99% of the benefits, whether you're fermenting something like porridge or something like sourdough bread or something like, kombucha. All these are different foods that you can decide, okay, I want to start off really simply. So you would start off with porridge, which I've developed a scoring system for the different recipes in the book called the Fermatrix. It's because it was sort of based on a matrix of different aspects, I'll call them, such as how long does it take to ferment, how many ingredients are involved. Another aspect is how do you need to add a culture or is it a wild ferment? Another aspect might be, do I need special gear to do this? So all those things conspire to create a specific score for a specific dish. So porridge, which is really just oats that have been sitting overnight in a jar, would be on the extreme simple end of that spectrum. And the Fermatrix score, I think, is like 7. Whereas something on the other end, which is sort of towards the end of the book, so it's somewhat organized in terms of lesser to more complex as you proceed, would be something like miso. So miso paste is something that requires 2 stages of fermentation. So that's complex there, and requires a long amount of time, sometimes up to a year or longer. So again, all those add up to a higher score. So miso has a score of 21. So that's the idea. So you could flip to any recipe in the book and you can kind of see I've laid out like this sauerkraut is about an 11. And it kind of gives you the heat map, right? So the green, yellow, red. So if you were daunted by this stuff, you could start off at the very beginning and say, okay, what can I do that's so simple that you can accidentally drop oatmeal in a glass of water and it would ferment.
On my journey of continuous health optimization and rabbit hole research, I've tested just about every binder you can imagine. Some excelled at binding heavy metals, others were unmatched for clearing mycotoxins, and a few were highly effective at removing microplastics. There are a few binders that get the job done, but most are either too harsh, too weak, or only target certain types of toxins. What I needed and what I couldn't find for a long time was a binder I could use on myself and my private clients in all scenarios. Something gentle enough for daily use, but potent enough to handle the deep detox work. That's what led me to Zeocharge. Zeocharge is a micronized zeolite-based binder. It's ultra-pure, fast-acting, and broad spectrum. Thanks to its honeycomb-like structure, it binds to a wide range of toxins from heavy metals, pesticides, microplastics, and even VOCs. And because of the way it's processed, it actually circulates throughout the body, not just in the gut, which is where most binders stop. I use it as my go-to for my clients, especially when they're clearing layers of toxicity without overwhelming the system. So if you're someone who's already working on your health and want to go deeper, or you suspect that lacking a good binder is one of the missing pieces in your health routine, then head to zeolitelabs.com and use the code IDEAL10 to get 10% off your order. And make sure to go back and check the episodes with the founder of Zeocharge, Jeff Hoyt. It will give you full details on what makes Zeocharge so unique. Those episodes dropped in June 2024 and January 2025. Again, that's zeolitelabs.com and the code is IDEAL10. Now, back to the show. I think with, you talked about that kind of white scum that can build. Honestly, I think people have to listen to their intuition. If they see visible molds, obviously we don't want to eat that, but actually you just scrape it off and you're good to go. And I think we have been conditioned to this over sanitized, over safe kind of culture. I've read about that kind of white scum is actually a protective mechanism of just protecting what's beneath. And actually, I get that with lacto-fermented carrots, sometimes sauerkraut, and you just scrape it off and away you go. And what I find fascinating, and it always amazes me, is I write the date of when I do the ferment. So like so just the day of the month and the month. And then sometimes I'll have sauerkraut just sat in a dark cupboard for months and months and months and months. Things like lacto-fermented carrots, I've learned through trial and error that they keep fermenting and then they get all mushy. So I actually time it where it's just, because if I make a big batch, I'll just stick it in the fridge just so, because I don't want to keep making loads of batches all the time. So if I make big batches, I just stick it in the fridge so it doesn't ferment. It just slows down that process and I can keep it longer in the fridge. But anyway, what I find fascinating is I'll make a sauerkraut and then it might be 6 months until I actually open a jar. And I always get like the leaf, and I stick it in, I push it down. And I think, how fascinating is it? If that leaf of cabbage was left in nature, it would be nothing now. It would have completely dissolved into the earth, been reused. But because you keep it in a certain environment, low oxygen environment, it literally stays intact. It just blows my mind to think you've literally stopped the decomposition process of nature. Just taking that leaf out before you start eating, it's like, wow, that has preserved itself for months, whereas in real life, it would have rotted to nothing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I like to say, I mean, you've touched on a lot of things there. The refrigerator is, I call it a fermentation time machine, because when you get down to the temperatures that require, safe refrigeration, that slows down the microbial activity significantly without killing the microbes, right? So that definitely allows us to regulate. Like you said, you don't want to continually ferment carrots because there's a lot of sugar in them and it could get funky and soft. So you move it to the refrigerator and that extends the shelf life even longer than in nature. But yeah, to your point. And then by judicious use of salt, that's kind of the main mechanism by which we're managing that decomposition, right? Because salt is a microbial inhibitor. Even though it's crucial for most fermented dishes, having the right amount of salt is key, right? So with the sauerkraut, it's something like 2 to 2.5% the weight of whatever the cabbage you're fermenting is the right amount to allow what they call the halophilic microbes, the ones that are okay with salt, and block out the ones that can't tolerate salt. And that's usually like the molds or the potential pathogens, which are, again, very unheard of in salt-based fermentation. It's extremely safe to do. There's never been a documented case of somebody, like straight up dying from eating like bad sauerkraut. But to your point, and I make this point in the book, often trust your senses, right? If you make a batch of something, you're not sure about it, you put it up to your face and you want to gag, don't override that sense, because something is telling from your body is telling you, nah, we shouldn't eat this. Even if the ferment is fine, but maybe if it's not, maybe something got in there. So trust your senses, and that's just good advice for all of life, right? I mean, we're sort of like, again, not to go on a tirade, but like we're told to trust other things outside of ourselves. But the reality is we are the measure of all things. And so that includes how we interact with our environment. And you get that, of course, but it's true for fermentation as it is in any other realm.
Honestly, like if you buy milk and you smell it and the first kind of inhale, it just smells a bit off, like your body tells you, it gives you clear signals, maybe not eat this or consume it, right? And sometimes we override that. Like sometimes you've got a sore stomach, but your need for sweet food overrides what your body's telling you, right? And you just do it anyway, then you feel worse, right? So the body is always giving you nice subtle clues of what to do and what not to do. So yeah, it's about tapping in. And actually, on that note, if you've ever got a bad stomach, having the brine of some fermented food is really good. Like, so, as I said, I do lacto-fermented carrots. And with that, as you take the carrots out, you're left with like a brine. When you do sauerkraut, it's all encompassing. There's no like additional water usually, but with lacto-fermented vegetables, there's a brine left over. And again, very powerful for drinking. And also, this is for the more advanced people, you can use that brine for for another batch of fermented foods. Because obviously we can use salt, but actually you can use that as a kind of a Kickstarter, which is very powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a fun term called backslopping, when you take a little bit of the mature brine and then you add it to your new batch, especially if you liked the flavor or whatever happened, whatever alchemy happened in that first batch, you're seeding the good bacteria into the new batch. Not to say that if you don't have a backslop, you should still, if you have good ingredients, you're still going to have success, but it's just sort of like, I call it an insurance policy. But also to your point, the brine itself is just as rich in probiotic content as the food. So yeah, like you said, when the jar is empty of carrots, the probiotics are still very much viable and a lot of flavor. I mean, I store my brine from kimchi and pickles, and I'll use that in salad dressings, in other cooking applications, just as a replacement for salt and water, because that's ultimately what it is. But so yeah, definitely this is a zero waste sort of mindset. There's very little waste going on, and reuse and use again what you've got.
There's something weirdly satisfying of when you make a batch and then for example, sauerkraut, I would leave out for 2 weeks minimum before consuming. Lacto-fermented carrots, 10 days. There's a weird satisfaction that you've made something, and then you just there's a waiting game. You just have to wait, and it's coming, and you just have to be patient, and you have to accept you've got to wait. And you just get on with your life, and it's a very rewarding fact when it's like, oh, today's the day I can start testing. It's funny how it works, but it's very rewarding because you've made it yourself. You've made something that is packed full of nutrients, very good for the body. So I love that whole process of making something and then just having the waiting game, and then you can start consuming it. So now within my household, on the fermentation guy, so I know when we're down to 1 jar of sauerkraut, I know I need to make the next batch, because that's roughly about 3 weeks worth of. So I'm constantly keeping things in rotation.
Yeah, love it, and you're right. Yeah, it's a role. Like the fermentation guy or gal is a role in the household. If you want to keep the probiotics flowing, you gotta keep on it. And you make a very good point about how I like to say fermentation happens at the speed of nature. It is a lesson in sort of slowing down and just really observing, because it is a natural process. It happens in a jar or a bottle or a crock. So that reality of like, well, nature will get there, it's just good. It's a spiritual lesson as well as a physical lesson. But yeah, I get it. The fermenters problems. You're like, we're low on sauerkraut, and I don't have my time machine. What am I going to do? So yeah, that's definitely you get the hang of it. You get the rhythm. Like it sounds like you well developed that.
It's literally a rhythm. When you need to make a new batch, and weirdly, we're bred on this convenience culture. I really enjoy the session of making a batch. It's in an evening when everything's done for the day. I'll put on a good podcast and I'll just submerge myself in the process. And it's very therapeutic when you know the process and you just give yourself to the process. It's just like, it's enjoyable. There's loads of like YouTube videos that I love watching where there's just people working on farms. And there's it's a beautiful YouTube channel. There's like a farm in Azerbaijan or somewhere, and literally it's just them being out with the farm cats and the birds, and they're just making certain things. So it's not really fermented food, but it's more it's enjoying watching them go through a process of like maybe peeling certain things and then storing them or preserving them. That process is very therapeutic, just going through that process of doing things, So there's an enjoyment even in the process of making them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that reminds me of how many times where, it's like, okay, it's fermentation time. So I'll go out on a nice spring day out to the patio, set up a table. I'll maybe get like 40 or 50 pounds of cabbage, and then just zen and get in and do a batch. And I mean, you're right. It's very wholesome. It's very zen. Like, it's very, very therapeutic. And and the actual physical, if we're making kraut, for example, the crunching with your hands and imparting your chi, your prana, whatever you call that life force, is real. I think it imparts that into the food, and you're going to have a more successful and delicious batch.
And also, I think it's great you're doing it outside, because you're getting access to the microbial environment outdoors versus indoors. So there'll be all the different things, whether I'm guessing it's your garden or somewhere that you're taking in nature. So that's really useful as well. Because actually, when we talk about kefir, the kefir will be like, you could have the same grains, but if you've got those kefir grains in the west side of the US and then you ship some of them over to China, it's going to be different, because the environment that those grains are in will have a different impact on the actual ferment. So, that's how fascinating fermentation is. They're communicating, the microbes are communicating with their environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. I talk about sort of to borrow the term from the wine industry, the terroir, right? The terroir at the microbial level is the air, the water, the food source that you're giving it. So all those absolutely, affect what the subtle flavors are. And there's nothing more obvious in that realm than sourdough, right? So sourdough starters all over the world have different characteristics. And here in the US, the most famous sourdough starter everybody knows about is the San Francisco sourdough, right? Because the Bay Area has a very unique microclimate, which when you remove, like you said, when you remove the starter from that climate, immediately adapts to whatever the new climate that it's in. So it's true of any ecosystem. So it's just fascinating that we get to see these ecosystems and move them around. And I think it helps us understand the fractal nature of the whole biosphere, really, right? I mean, what is as is above, so below. So that's true for microbes as well.
Here's something interesting, and I love your take on it. Sometimes when I do multiple ferments, so I'll do a sauerkraut and a carrots and some other things, I've made them all in one batch. I stick them all together in a corner. I think there's a communication system between them all. Obviously, they're all in jars, but I'll notice some might ferment faster and they're all start kind of sitting at certain times. So I think there's like an energetic kind of transmission between all of them. I don't know if that resonates with you, but I feel like there's some acknowledgement of the individual jars,
Wow. I mean, that's getting to a level. I mean, I definitely am into the woo as far as that goes. I haven't noticed that specifically, but now I'm going to start paying attention because yes, like right now I've got 4 different pickles. I've got hot sauce from like last fall. So everybody just kind of knows that this is the universe of where most of that happens. And my sourdough starter is over here at the moment. But yeah, so it's in the fermentarium, which is this room. I turned my dining room into a space. So yeah, I'm sure there's some energetic, everybody's like, woohoo. But you're right. It cross communication between different ecosystems. Why would that? And that works everywhere else in nature. So
that's what my intuition is saying, and I can't explain it, but there's definitely some energetics going on between the different jars.
Would there be a different flavor? Let's say you had a jar isolated in a different room, and then one that was, with all the others. Are you tasting? What are the subtle differences between those?
I haven't done that to that extent, but I noticed there's different activity when there's loads bundled together, and sometimes a carrot ferment might take a certain amount of time, but actually when it's with other ferments, it's a bit more active than it would usually be. And it's just on an intuitive level, I know there's something going on. They're communicating in some way. I don't know. I can't explain it. And it's definitely in the woo-woo realm, but there's something going on.
Cool. Maybe I'll do some controlled experiments like that. Same exact batch, split it in half, put one in its own room, put one here, and just see what happens in a completely unscientific way. But
Oh, I'll tell you what I do. And I've had these guys on the show. There's a product called analemma wands. So I will, obviously you can't do this with sauerkraut, but when I'm making like a lacto-fermented vegetable, like lacto-fermented carrots, before I put the water with salts, the brine into the carrots, I will structure the water with the wands. And I think that elevates the flavor, definitely. Because actually they've done experiments on stirring that wand with wine and elevating the flavor of the wine. That's something that I've been doing. So structuring the water prior to letting the fermentation process take place.
Yeah. I mean, I have my reverse osmosis filter. And then at the end of that, I have a water structuring. It's an undersink device called Aquify. There are a whole host of different ones that will basically restructure the water so that it's more like it would be in a natural spring. That's the overall goal of what vortexers, water structurers, and there's different ways to do it. You can do it through vortical patterns. You can do it through magnetism. There's lots of different ways. And I think analemma, so they charge the water, put it in a glass tube, and then just the affinity of water molecules, simply sticking it into other water gets that in line. And because everything is resonant, and that's what's going on. So to sort of explain, I mean, in a true scientific way, what is actually happening, because, many people roll their eyes or say, oh yeah, structured water, that's just woo, but it's not woo. It's science. It's science that's being revealed. But so point is, whatever I'm putting in my body, whether it's my drinking water or making food with it or fermenting, same thing. Definitely have to use structured water. Will just help create more harmony with the dish.
Here's something that it's just kind of coming through me. I remember years ago, they used to say King Charles, before he was king, he was Prince Charles. And they would say, Prince Charles talks to his plants. It was like a piece in like the media to be like, he's a bit crazy at times. He talks to his plants. But now, if you think about it, it's there are experiments where, sending good vibration can help things grow. Bad vibration stops it from growing, right? So if you were to like swear at a plant, say you're bad, it would have an effect. So I wonder if you could do the same thing with your ferments. Again, I'm just coming up with crazy ideas, but just to kind of give some love to your fermented foods in the process. In theory, it would work, right? What the final product would be, who knows?
I absolutely agree. I think, you should sing to your krauts, sing to them. And yes, because everything is consciousness. This is the big revelation, if you're into the woo world, that like is constantly unfolding, is that we live in a world where everything is consciousness. And so why would this be, we're just two iterations of that. So yes, I believe not only when you sing or send love, and this is how you communicate with certain animals, like with birds, you speak from your heart, you could do that. And I think what might happen, just a little bit speculative, is that the microbes would pick up energetically what you as the eventual eater need, and that shows up in your energetic field. And so it could craft, okay, well, this guy needs, additional whatever, potassium. I'm just making that up. But like, I think those interactions are going on all the time. Again, hard to prove without specific equipment, but yes, sing to your ferments, be in a good state of mind, be relaxed. And I think that will definitely come through the finished products for sure. And it does, because these are life forms, of course, they're going to respond to that type of energy.
Quick one from me. If this episode resonates with you, share it on your socials to spread the word so it can help others. And if you're looking to fix your health and reclaim the energy you had when you were younger, shoot me a DM with the word detox on Instagram and let's make it happen. Now let's get back to the show. So if someone is listening to this episode and they're like, right, fermented foods, I'm going to give it a go. Where would you recommend they start? What should they do? Is there a particular type of fermented food you'd recommend to do? Where should people start?
Sure. So definitely go to my website, which is fermentersclub.com. Plenty of just my adventures, but also a lot of the recipes. They're free to play with. Then I have Fermenters Club Academy, which if you really want to start to, I want to learn how to make sourdough bread, but I don't have time to go to an in-person workshop. You can get in on the Academy, so learn that way. Then of course the book itself, which is available on Amazon, Kindle, and hardback and paperback formats. But yeah, what I would say is, maybe if you eat cereal grains, like porridge might be look for that recipe online on the website. And that's a good way to get started. And then if you're ready to dabble with fermented vegetables, something like that's one of your favorites, the carrot sticks. It's as simple as if you can dissolve a little bit of salt in water, you pretty much know how to ferment. Find a good jar, start off with something that's so basic that, like you can have your kids, if you're old enough to use a knife, like chop up the carrots, put it in, mix the water, let it sit somewhere for a week or two. It's really just knowing it's a very low risk process. But those are the first, couple of recipes I like to get people involved in. And then as you realize, something that's not fermented, that's in my fridge, I can probably create something that is fermented. For example, all the condiments that we have, like mustard and ketchup and vinegars, those are typically can be also made through fermentation. So, but just to get started, something as simple as oats that sit overnight in 1 or 2 nights in some water, and then they're easy to cook, and then they become a little bit funky through fermentation. Just to sort of see the cause and effect and to realize the simplicity of it.
Amazing. We'll put that in the show notes for the listeners to check out. And as I said, it's a fantastic book. And if you're curious about fermenting, it's a great book to read and really build up your knowledge. And with anything, it's a skill. Once you do it a couple of times, you've got it, you understand it. And then, as we were saying, it becomes a very therapeutic process, just making the ferments as and when needed. Huge benefit to your life. As I said, I've been consuming them for many years, have them every day. My family has them and we definitely see the impact of them. So if you're curious, get fermenting. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Austin. Final question from me. What 3 pieces of advice would you give our listeners to help them achieve their ideal day?
I would say, well, to recap, some type of ferment at least once a day. And this can just be something as small, the serving size as your fist, will help, restore your gut, get you back into health. I would also say, spend a little bit of time barefoot every day on grass, on earth somewhere, and invest in high quality drinking water.
3 powerful points to finish off on. Austin Durant, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Adam. It's been a wonderful time.
And for more after the show, make sure you head over to youridealday.com where you can find out more information. Please support the show by heading to Apple Podcasts to leave a review and to let everybody know that the show is awesome. Or you can take a screen grab, post it on your Instagram stories, or just tell a friend about the podcast to get the word out there. I'd appreciate that so much. Take care, and thanks for tuning in.